Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, the 24th of May, Dutch Baughman is going to be tying a brand new fly I'm excited to see called the Mulpin. Now, on the weekly tip, well, it's going to involve a horse, a glove, and an eye. You'll have to stick around, though, to find out what all that means. Anyway, we're the BTs from Boise, Idaho, and right now I'm going to add in a side by side my good friend Dutch Baughman, and we'll read an introduction in his behalf. Yeah, Dutch Baughman, pronounced Bachman, not Bauman like I did. Dutch had to correct me back when.
Uh,
Began fly tying a journey in 1957. Having no supplies, he tied his first fly on a rusty old hook, thread from Mama's sewing basket, a feather found on the ground, and hair cut from his dog. The fly was magnificent. Since that time, he has been mentored by Michael Radensich, Wayne Llewellyn, tied with many exceptional tyers, and is a proud member of the Roadkill Roundtable Fly Tying Group. It's a group that's been tying on a regular basis since 1972. Dutch is also a proud life member of the FFI Fly Tying Group and a recipient of the FFI Buzz Busick Memorial Fly Tying Award, the Dick Nelson Fly Tying Award, and the Darwin Atkin Fly Tying Award. Dutch, welcome to BT's, and we look forward to the Mulpin.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate the invitation to come back again. If you want to go ahead and put the recipe up, Al, we'll go ahead and start with that and explain. This is the Mulpin, and the recipe there on the right, it's a Gamakatsu B10S size 6 or 10 through 10. The packet looks like this, and it's famously sharp, the B10S. If you look at a Gamakatsu SL113H, I think it's the same hook, but this one is, of course, for saltwater. It's tin plated. The thread is black, primarily because I only use black and white thread dressing a fly. Occasionally, if I need a hot spot or an egg sac or a thread body midge type pattern, I'll use colored thread, but otherwise everything is white or black. In my tool caddy, I carry typically a Vivus 14-aught white and black. I use a monofilament 0.004. If you want to try to tie with monofilament, if you've never done that, it's 0.004 thread is exactly the same as 7X tippet. But I use a lot of monofilament. I also, in my tool caddy, have white and black in nano silk, 20 denier and 200 denier. And I carry a bobbin holder of, it's called underbody, and it's essentially just a 4-ply floss. And it's a very good material to use for building taper and that type of thing. But everything that I just described is in white and black. I'm going to use rabbit strip. You can use pine squirrel for a smaller size. I'm going to show you a different pattern that I use primarily for pine squirrel. But in the rabbit strip, this is kind of a new product. It's from Hairline. It's called Shimmer Rabbit Strips. This one is crawfish orange with silver shimmer. And what that means is if you turn the rabbit strip, you can see the tips are coated in a silver material. This also comes in a shimmer of gold, crawfish orange and gold, black and silver, black and gold, olive and silver, olive and gold, and I think it comes in purple as well. So we're going to use that for the tail material. The body is a lead wire, and I'm using 0.025. You could use whatever flavor is your favorite, depending on how fast you want to get the fly deeper in the water column. And also on the body will be polar chenille. I'm going to use a product that's called Vivus UV Body Fuzz. Polar chenille is a very good product, and I initially used polar chenille on this pattern, but I went to this Vivus material because it's just like polar chenille, except that the strands are a little bit shorter. And if you wanted to get a pattern with a much longer strands, then Palmer chenille might be your choice in that deal. So that will be the body. The legs are orange and black, and they're made by Perfect Rubber. That's the brand name. And one thing I think I've learned about fly tires is it seems that when we tie in rubber legs, what's the first thing we do? We move them around. We stretch them and twist them and try to move them into a different position than where they're tied in. And these Perfect Rubber legs are very, very tough. You can move them around. They don't break. They float very well. But this is almost exclusive now as far as rubber legs for me. And the hackle, this is also an interesting product. It is it's a whiting Schlappen hack. And it's actually Coq de Leon Schlappen Pardo dyed orange. And all that means, Pardo just means it's dark or brown, sometimes olive. But in this case, Whiting took olive and they dyed a pack orange. And it's crawfish orange, and that's what we're going to use tonight. And that's what you see on this pattern in the vise right now. This Schlappen pack is kind of hard to find. Jack helped me out last week. He found some and we were able to grab it, but it's kind of hard to come by. I think it's a new product, but it's a very, very, very nice. And when we get to that point in the fly, I'm going to show you some of the characteristics of it that are particularly nice. And the thread will be head. We'll finish it off with a little UV resin. So, okay, thank you, Al. So how did we get to this point? First of all, let me explain the Mulpin. Every year, Jack and Barry and I go to Montana and we fish with a friend that I fished for over 20 years. And he's born and raised in Missoula. He's a professional fly fishing guide. And every year when I take a fly pattern to him, I'll show it to him and I tell him the name of it. And as soon as I tell him the name of it, he renames it. Last year I took a hopper to him and I call it the Stone Hopper. And he said, Adam said, what do you call this, Dutch? And I said, well, I call it the Stone Hopper. And immediately he called it the Stopper. So it became the Stopper. So this year, I'm going to take this fly and I was going to call it the Missoula Sculpin. But I knew as soon as I saw Adam and I showed him this pattern, he would ask me the name and I would tell him Missoula Sculpin. And I expect he would immediately say Mulpin. So I'm just going to go ahead and call it the Mulpin and get that over with. I'm going to show you one variation of this in that instead of the Schlappen hackle, I can't help myself, but I used woven hair hackle. And so I was going to call that the Grant Mulpin. So I just decided to call that the Gulpin. And I'll show you the Gulpin later on as well. So how did we get here? Well, I wanted every summer when we go to fish in Montana, there seems to be a lot of sculpin in the water. And so I started looking at patterns that I thought were pretty good sculpin patterns. And in particular, the Sculpzilla. The Sculpzilla, that's too big. It's a big fly with lots of material on it. And I also looked at something called the Johnson's Creek leech. It's an inverted hook, but also lots of material, lots of movement and so forth. And I thought about another pattern that I like locally. We have a big event here in North Texas when the sand bass come in the February, March, April timeframe. And I use a pattern there that I call the pine. Where is it? Here we go. The pine minnow. And that's actually made with one piece of material, which is a one piece of pine squirrel. So I was thinking about all those different profiles on those patterns, and I started tying each one and doing an experiment here and there and so forth. And I came up with this one. And so that's what we're going to dress here this evening. We'll take this one out of the hook. We'll start out with the hook, and I prefer to debarb all my hooks. And I know that if we go in here like this and just press like perpendicular to the barb, oftentimes, too often, I think all we do is bend that little barb over. So I watched Lefty Cray one time. He would take pliers like this and hold the hook and then roll the hook around the pliers, and you can actually feel that grinding the barb off the hook. After you look at it, the hook is nice and round. There's no flakes. There's nothing there. So that's kind of how I prefer to debarb. We're going to use 0.004 monofilament tonight, and typically I begin my thread base, the jam hitch, wherever the first tie-in element's going to be. And for this one, actually, I'm going to put some wire back here for weight. So I would probably start back in here someplace, but actually what I want to do is I want to lay a thread base in this area right in here. And I'm going to use spiral wraps to do that before I put the wire on. So I could just start the thread base right here, just in front of the start of the bend, and go forward and then back again. If you're familiar with the reverse jam hitch, that would be a place where a reverse jam hitch could work pretty good. But I want that spiral wrap. I didn't want it to look real pretty with edge-to-edge wraps and so forth, because I just have this notion that the wire will grab a little better if it's not exactly smooth like that. So then I'm going to take a piece of wire, 0.025, and I'll put it in a hackle plier. And I want to begin my first wrap of wire just inside of where the thread is hanging. The thread is hanging where the barb would normally be. So just between the barb and the hook point, closer to the hook point, is where I'd like the first wrap to be. So I'm going to lay this in place here and begin that first wrap. There's one. That's going to be right at the right spot, too. Now I want to make sure that I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch of bare hook shank up here at the front. So that's exactly 1/4 of an inch. So I'm in good shape there. All right, now that with the thread, I'm going to build just a few thread wraps, right? The thread, as I said, is now slid back just a little bit to just behind where the barb would be. And it's actually right about where the start of the bend would be. And in formal hook anatomy, we know where the hook shank and there's the bend. Well, this little area right there where the thread is hanging is actually called the start of the bend. And I'm going to just do some thread wraps right around that start of the bend. And this is one of the few times that I will intentionally make thread wraps on top of the previous thread wrap. I want to come back here to about the third wire wrap. And at this point, I'm going to take a rubber leg, and I take the one strip of rubber leg and half it twice. And then I'm going to wrap the rubber leg around the thread, match up the tips. I'm going to raise the thread up. I want to put the thread in about the third slot. And then as I go around, I'm going to do a tightening wrap. And now that rubber leg is secure. It's not going to roll around. And as I wrap toward the bend, I'm only doing holding wraps here. I'm not trying to do tightening wraps. I want to keep that on top of the hook shank. So very carefully, right down to that last wire. Now, when I get to that last wire, now I'm on the start of the bend. This one, do a little tightening wrap, a couple of those, and those should fall just like that. One on each side, equal distance apart, kind of slope down that way. Now I'm going to return the thread to the front, about the first groove, take the other piece of rubber leg, I'm going to use this Vivus body fuzz. And what I'll do here is actually Vivus material around the thread. Raise that to the hook shank, tie it in right there. Grab that butt end, grab it onto the hook shank with some thread wraps just to secure it. So I'm going to lower this spool of material onto my tying bench. I'm going to bring these two front legs forward. Let's get those out of the way. I'm going to roll this Vivus material back up. I'm actually going to wrap this from the spool. We'll come around. I'm right about where those front legs are. I can unwrap them and let them hang. Pooch them back and do the next thread wrap in front of them. I'm going to stop with body material right there so that I can take the thread now and come up and catch that in that first wire wrap. That'll secure it. I don't want it to slide off of the wire, so now I'm going to go in front of it. Now, there's no particular purpose in this other than kind of a cleanup on aisle 5. I'm going to secure that material right there. The next thing we're going to do is take the rabbit strip and attach the rabbit strip, pooch it over the hook point, and pull it up tight between both of those legs in the back. So to do that, I'm actually going to come up here and put a couple half hitches right in there. So when I invert my thread, the bobbin holder won't cause the thread to move out of place. Now I can invert this. And here's the rabbit strip that I'm going to use. This is the crawfish orange with the gold tips. So to measure this, I'm going to take the leather strip and place it right where my thread is hanging. I actually want to move my thread toward the bend just a little bit. That's where I want to end up, right there. So I'm going to take the leather strip and I'm just going to hold it there and measure now with my index finger in my left hand down to where the end of the wire is, where the tail is tied in, and so forth. Now I'm going to be very careful, and right about where my finger is, I'm going to lay this up here. I'm going to turn it so you can see a little better. Let's see if I can get it here where you can see it. I'm going to lay that rabbit strip so that I can impale the leather strip right onto the hook point, right in the middle of the leather strip. Pooch it on there good, and I can see that the hook point comes through. Now, knowing that I've got a half hitch here, I can take the hook out of the vise and roll the rabbit strip around. Try to hold that leather in place just so I can tighten this down back here and stroke that rabbit fur back a little bit. Now I can put the hook point, the hook back into the vise with the hook shank level. And by the way, all of these tying instructions are on my website. My website is flyfishingskills.com. And if you go to the fly tying section, you'll see all the instructions for the Mulpin and all the measurement instructions and so forth. So now the next step is I'm going to pull this piece of rabbit strip down, but I know my thread is hanging right where I actually want to tie that rabbit strip in. So I have too much rabbit strip sticking out here. So what I'm going to do is I want to get a length of rabbit strip that if we look at this strip up here, I want to have enough rabbit strip so it just folds right over the edge of that wire so that my tightening wraps will be on hook shank right here, but right up against the wire. And that will fold this leather around the wire and secure it to the hook shank. Now I'm going to pull some of that fur off of the rabbit strip right there at the front and get that bare so that my thread would be digging right into that leather. And typically I would wax my thread right here. When I look at that from the side, I think that leather strip's right hanging over the wire like exactly I want it to do. Come up here, I'm going to catch it, tightening wrap. Now the next tightening wraps are going toward the bend. I'm actually going snug back to that wire. Edge to edge, tightening straight up, edge to edge, not on top of the previous wrap. Straight up, tightening wrap, back to that spot. A little bit more cleanup. Okay. Now I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go edge to edge where I started. Going now this time I'm going high, edge to edge. Just covering up the rest of that leather. You know, what I'm looking at this point is this is where I'm going to tie in a guinea hackle, a guinea feather, and this is where I'm going to tie in that piece of schlappen. For the guinea hackle, you all have seen packets of this, but I just wanted to show you that when you get a packet of strung guinea feathers, it's like this, and you look at it and say, oh, those are pretty nice. But notice the size of those dots. Now, in the same pack, I turn it over. What do we notice? They're smaller. Did somebody put the wrong feathers, wrong hack on my guinea pack? No, those are galena feathers, and that's actually part of the hide of a guinea fowl. From this, I'm going to pick out a feather, and typically a guinea feather with the bigger dots, something like this. And I strip away all the stuff down here off the rachis. So the rachis is clean. Go back, and I like things to be prepared typically before I go to the hook shank to tie them in. But it's going to be a little tough to do on this particular element. So what I'm doing right now is separating the barbs. These are barbs. They're not fibers. These are barbs. What I'll do now is I'll lay this feather on my bench, and I'll take a brush and I'll stroke those barbs straight out to the sides, spread them out like that. Now, typically, I keep a hackle plier on the stem of my vise right here. Typically, I would put the tip into the hackle plier and bend these barbs downward so they form a V before I tie it in. And it'd be very difficult for you to see that. So I'm going to take a chance here. I'm actually going to tie this in. My thread is back all the way toward the bend in the tie-in spot, so I can put the material in place. Come straight up, catch it, edge to edge, holding wraps. I'm not tightening, just holding wraps. Now a couple more back toward the bend. Now this is what I would normally be doing on the hackle plier on my stem. I'm going to try to do it here so you can see it. You can fold feathers, fold barbs, a couple of different ways. You can do it in your fingers, but I typically like to do it with my scissors. So what I do now is I separate my scissors like this, and I hold them so that I have the tip edge, the inside edge. I'm going to lay that edge. I'm going to lay that edge right on the side of the rachis and very gently start raking down the rachis, bending those feathers. Very gently, because you can sure cut them off pretty easy. See how they bend down? I can do the same to the other side. I don't have to because they're already shaped in a V now. I'll do the other side, same way. And I can actually go back over as many times as I want to get as much V shape as I need. I'll come back here now and get that butt end out of there. There's butts. Now I'm going to wrap this and go over the top, hold it in. So bend those back. Hold those in over the top. Catch it. Those are tightening wraps. Edge to edge, tightening wraps going toward the bend. Now, none of those barbs got encumbered in applying that hackle. I can spread those out. Now, a little more cleanup on aisle 3 here. Now, I can't see that with my naked eye, but when I look on the, well, I watch the monitor when I demonstrate, and you can sure see more on the monitor than you can in person, it seems. At this point, I'll take the scissors I use for cutting hair and heavier things, and you'll see how long those legs are in the back. I'm going to cut the rabbit strip now just a little bit longer than the length of the back legs. I'll come back here with the leather strip now on the bottom, and I'll just very gently trim a V right into that leather. I want those front legs to be just a little bit shorter in the back. So I hold them together at the length I want. I cut them at the same time. Now they're both the same length. Time for the schlappen. Now this is the CDL schlappen that was Pardo dyed orange. And you look at the bottom of this and you see how it's really remarkable. It's how mottled that feather is. And that's the bottom. This is the top. It's also mottled. And when those barbs off of this feather spread out, it really gives an appearance that's pretty unique. So I'll do the same kind of thing with this feather that I did with the guinea feather. I'll spread all those barbs out away from the rachis, lay it on my bench, and with the brush, brush them out to the side so they all are perpendicular from the rachis. And actually, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to come in here now and I'm going to catch that material. To do that properly, I'm going to spin my bobbin holder counterclockwise and get rid of the twist that has been placed in there from all the thread wraps I've done. Now when I come up here, that thread, when I take the tension on it, falls toward the bend. See that? Now I can come around and catch that material in exactly the spot I want. I'm doing edge-to-edge wraps toward the bend. It's going to secure it up against that knob right there. And pull up on just a little, okay, that's good. Now I'm going to take my scissors and just like I did with the guinea, I'll come over here with my edge of my scissors and very gently makes no difference at all, but for aesthetics, I'll come over and just cover that up just a little bit. So it looks pretty. Now move my thread up here out of the way. Now, this schlap and feather is pretty long. It's, I'll say it's 7 inches long. And some of these, when I'm dressing this pattern, I'll dress some of them to be more sparse hackle than others. Some of them I'll use most of the 7 inches, and it's a really heavily hackled pattern, but that really is working well in deeper, heavy riffle, strong current water. So anyway, lots of movement. So I'll do the same kind of technique, come over the top gently. Straighten out, nothing's encumbered. And I'm watching the rachis to go right next to the previous wrap. That's all I'm looking for right there. No encumbered barbs, straight over the top. Sometimes these are a little bit longer. When they come over the top, they can twist a little bit down here at the bottom. See how they're laying down already? It's kind of what I'm looking for. Now, when I put a woven hair hackle, David Buckner, when I put a woven hair hackle on this pattern, it's 1 inch long. It's going to be longer than the barbs on this hackle. All right, now that's as far as I should go. Now here's a different kind of technique. I'm going to come up here now and very carefully pull the barbs away from the rachis. With the thread hanging right here in bare stem, bare rachis, I'm going to allow my thread to go around the rachis twice. Slide the thread up to the hook shank, and one of those hair barbs will always jump out. Don't be too concerned. And as I go up over the hook shank, I release the tension on the bar, on the hackle, go around. And now that hackle is hidden back into the wrap, and there's no rachis to be encumbering building my head. Now a head, I think, should always be built from the eye toward the bend. Mainly because if you did have any encumbrances in the portion where the head is going to be built, by wrapping toward the bend, each thread wrap can go around the hook shank and rest on the previous wrap as you go up. If you try to build the head from the bend toward the eye and there's a slope, a taper of any kind, that thread will fall down. And what you end up doing is making too many wraps, thinking you're compensating for the thread falling down. I'm just going to do some more edge to edge tightening wraps going into that hackle. Edge to edge, nothing on top of the previous. Until I get the size of the head that I'm looking for. Go back to the front. Edge to edge wraps. One more time to the back, edge to edge. Now I'm seeing the taper being built. That's the last one right there. Now I'm going to do the proper whip finish. I normally would do this with my fingers, but so with the tool, I'm going to make sure that that vertical portion right there, my thread, goes around the hook shank, edge to edge, toward the eye. Every wrap now is toward the eye, edge to edge going toward the eye. Nothing is wrapping over the previous wrap. So I get to the eye, slide it out. This is a knot, so I'm going to close it and seat it. With just the tips of my scissors open just a little bit, I can run that up there and push. I don't have to cut. That's the same pattern, but that is a woven hair hackle. And I did this one much more sparse. So in certain conditions, that'll be the one that I'll choose. But let's talk a minute about resin. And I won't go deep into this, Al, but years ago, scientists did a study and they discovered that fish eyeballs are a lot like our eyeballs. We both have cones. We have a blue cone, a red cone, a green cone, and all that. But fish have a cone for UV. So the scientists announced their findings, and that's all that the fly fishing or fly tying industry needed. All of a sudden, we had to have all this UV stuff going on. Well, the scientists continued their research, and what they discovered was by the time the fish grows to about 4 inches, that UV cone dissolves. So all this nonsense about we have to put UV resin here and there and all this so the fish can see it, I'm not so sure that's the case. So I've kind of gotten to a point where I think of UV resin as a very good tool, very good material to finish, to put on shellbacks or featherbacks, and to finish the head. Another thing I've learned is that these UV lamps, we don't want them to be too close because that can actually cook it too quick on the inside and so forth. But I'm holding it 9 or 10 inches away, and I like to rotate the pattern, finish that off.
That fly is absolutely awesome.
Put a drop right there. And it's a much smoother head. I'll do the same, the last one right there. Now, let me explain how I fish this thing. On the Blackfoot River in Montana, we throw a lot of streamers, a lot of sculpin patterns. And so I scoot that away there. And the technique that we use is just a little bit different in that we'll cast this pattern upstream, let it sink, and then we use one of those little football-shaped strike indicators. One half is orange, one half is chartreuse. And after you cast the fly, let it sink. A hard mend downstream, and whichever color on that little football is downstream, just keep that color downstream. And any other line management that you have is to keep the color of that strike indicator downstream, but the strike indicator is actually leading the fly. So, what do we have? Neil, you ask why lead wire and not lead free? Any kind of wire will be fine, Neil. I don't like weighted flies to start with. I don't use any kind of weighted head and so forth. Typically, I'll use split shot on other types of flies, but for a sculpin streamer pattern, I'll use wire to get it deep. Okay, Al, that's it.
Now you've done it with both the hair hackle and with the schloppen hackle.
Yes, sir.
Have you had a chance to test them out to get a sense of which one you think you like better and what kind of water?
That's exactly the point, Al. It depends on the circumstances. Because of the function of the woven hair hackle, I certainly would use that in those particular circumstances, and that would be in a heavier riffle,
Yep.
stronger current. It performs equally as well in still water. For those that don't know, the woven hair hackle, when that gets wet, it stays away from the hook shank and wiggles. It doesn't collapse around the body of the fly like a schlappen will. But when I looked at that little pine minnow that I showed you made out of pine squirrel, when that thing gets wet, it is actually exactly the shape of a minnow. So I wanted to incorporate some of that into this Mulpin fly. So that's the look I would get in certain circumstances. But where the function of the woven hair hackle is best, that's where I use it.
Yeah, I had assumed that the hair hackle was more for the swifter water, the softer hackle and the softer water,
Yeah.
Since you're letting this go down, Dutch, what about fishing it with a hybrid spay line? So the line sinks the fly,
Well,
and then you can swing it.
my short answer, Neil, would be however you fish a streamer, do this. For example, the Skagit setup on a two-hand rod. I actually use the same Skagit setup when I fish for carp locally, just so that sink tip, not the sink line, but the sink tip, it's everything down deep. And the reason the weight on this is important is, first of all, to get deep into the water column. But when that fly is moving through the water column with biological drift, the current is moving the fly. I want that weight to be equally balanced on the hook shank so that the fly maintains this. It doesn't do the jigging action. And I can do that on a sink tip better than I can a sink line. And I can do it the same equally well on a distributed wire instead of a bead head.
Thank you.
Dutch, why two different types of hackle? Why the guinea fowl and then any particular reason?
Yeah, in particular, the first couple of prototypes I did, I used green guinea because I was using an olive colored rabbit strip. And I looked at that when I was done. I thought, well, wait a minute. If I used that red guinea, I might be replicating more of a gill plate. And so the only reason really for the guinea is to introduce a little bit of red underneath the hackle to imitate the gill.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, Dutch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that folding of the hackles that you did with the scissors. That, according to Shuey, was what Busick used to do with his flies when he folded hackles, and he basically called it a scissor fold.
Yeah.
And you just have to remember to kind of angle that scissor so that the edge doesn't bite into the stem. It kind of goes over the, if the fibers are there, you want to make sure that you don't have that scissor cut into the stem.
That's exactly right, Jim, and Buzz did, and Wayne told me, Bud Hines told me about that too.
Yeah.
Buzz used to use scissors, and actually, when you try that, you can feel the click as the edge of your scissor rides over the insertion of the barb into the rachis. You can feel it. Most important, go slow,
Yeah.
go real slow, and until you get a real touch on it, keep the edge, the tip. When you're looking at the edge of the scissors, use just the tip of the scissors and that angle of the scissor, as Jim's talking about, on the rachis is about 45 degrees. Go
Yeah.
very, you don't have to go fast. Go very slow, and you can go back over it as many times as you need to get more fold if that's necessary.
Phenomenal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate the chance to be here again.
Well, we're definitely glad to have you. And now it's time to go to the weekly tip. Now, what are we going to do that's got something to do with a horse, a glove, and an eye? Well, here's what we're going to do. You probably figured that out by now. Anybody that knows, we've pretty well switched over from the Griffin Sin that we could afford, and we've gone to Healthy Hoof. So we're going to be using glue. Healthy Hoof. We're going to be using boxed gloves like the CSIs use on television. I don't know if they do it in real life. They use something else, I would suspect. And we're going to be using jungle cock. And in fact, I'm pointing at a jungle cock feather right there, right to the left of that little star. It's all split to pieces. Where some of these others look pretty good. Well, Marvin Nolte, way back in the day, taught me fix a split jungle cock nail. Now, I have never used Healthy Hoof to do this. I don't know if I can fix one that's damaged as bad as the one you see in the picture. We're just going to venture into new territory and see what happens. And if it doesn't fix it, I have plan B sitting there just in case we need to. But let me get over here now and get my hands into this. And in fact, I'm just going to pull a glove out right now. I'm going to set the Healthy Hoof right there. I'll get out a glove. And I guess we might as well just talk to each other when I'm putting the darn thing on, because I know how on television they put these things on and whether they just jump on their hands. Let me tell you what, in real life, it sure don't work that way for me. But anyway, we are going to put on this glove. We're going to take a feather. I'm just going to grab one right now, and we're going to put glue on the fingertip and the thumb and bring the two together like that. And then we will draw the damaged feather between the pressed fingers. Now, what's important is how tight or loose we keep those fingers. Now, I'm going to talk about percentages. I am going to say that's 100% pinch, and I cannot pull that feather out. There's no way. If I back off to 75, I can slide that out, but it's under a lot of tension. You want to use a 75% pinch. Now, if that doesn't make any sense to you, pinch it pretty good, but still allow it to slip. So let's go into the repair process now. I'm going to take my glue and I'm just going to set it down here. And I'm going to reach over to the tying area. And I'm going to grab this, take it over to the vise. Now here is a pretty good jungle cock eye right there. It's not bad, but almost the same size on the opposite side of the cape. We've got one that looks like that. Well, I'm going to see if I can repair that, and if I can't, I've got some that are not in quite a bad a shape that I've set aside just in case. But I'll just pull this guy out, and I think I'll just slip him into the vise jaws for right now to see if it'll hold there. No, it won't. I'll flip it over the other way. It'll hold that way. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is, I hate using glue around my cameras, but I've gotten by doing it so far this year without too many bad problems. So we'll give it another try. And what I'm going to do now is just put glue all over there and all over the thumb. Set that aside. Grab my feather. And slowly draw that out between my glued fingers under a very tight tension. And there's a repaired eye. Set it aside to dry. Now, would I put that on a fly that I'm going to mount under glass? Probably not, unless it was going to be the offside nail that's hidden against the backside of the frame. But it sure makes that just almost as good as one of the others here that you can see right there. Okay, now there's a question. First off,
Al?
let me get my glove off and get this glue out of here before I end up messing something up, and I'll throw that away. Okay, now the
Put on the
question.
glue.
Put the lid on there. I've already knocked it over once. I dang near had a disaster as it was. So anyhow, go ahead and ask the question. I'm just cleaning some stuff up here.
Yeah, Al, I've used that method to repair jungle cock eyes, except I don't put the glue on the thumb. I put it on the index finger and just glue the underside, and that leaves not as shiny a surface over the top of the jungle cock. You might try that and see if it'll work that way, and if you like it better or not.
Very good suggestion. I will do that. And I have in the past. Quite frankly, it's been long enough. I don't remember. And I might even be misremembering how Marvin showed me to do the process. I just know that at the end of it, if you drag it out from between your fingers too fast, it doesn't seem to put it back together. If you go slow, under pressure, it gets the job done. So
Yeah.
there's a tip for you
Yeah.
all to play with and see what works best for you. Any other questions before we go into the sharing portion of tonight's session? Okay, folks, now it's time for us to learn from all of you. Sharing on BTs tonight.
Yeah, Wednesday night Zoom that you had, Al, on tools. It was a great Zoom. And one of the items that was shown was a bodkin that you remove the needle part and you store it in the barrel. And you have to unscrew it and then screw it down in the barrel. I think everybody knows that bodkins, when you put your bodkin in your tying bag, I don't know about you, but every time I stick my hand down in a tying bag, I get nailed by a bodkin. Or the bodkin goes through the tying bag and sticks onto something else. So I was looking on Amazon last night before last, and I found a retractable bodkin, and it's sold as a portable toothpick, believe it or not. And this is the device right here. The barrel is made of titanium, believe it or not. And you see this little button right here, where you slide this little button forward and it locks, and you can see it's a pretty substantial needle, very fine point, stainless steel. And to retract, all you got to do is like that, and it spring loads, goes back in. So,
well, then I'm going to share something, and I'm going to build on something that Michael Paradas shared with us last week, and he talked about an inexpensive 4-unit switcher for the Zoom studio, and I happened to be looking at the ones that he had put that he had showed on Amazon, and I ran across this one. And the thing I liked about this one is, yeah, it's more money, of course, but it's a touch screen for making changes so you know what you're switching from and to, or you can use the keys. And the thing that I really liked about it is that it's a 5-unit switcher rather than a 4. And both of mine are 4s, or you can go to a more expensive one like Jack Gillis has got, and it's an 8-unit switcher. But for $550, give or take, you're looking at a touch screen with a 5-camera switcher. could be pretty handy in some situations.
Tell me when it doesn't reflect, and it may not have.
It's good right there. It's good.
I went back and looked at a LaFontaine video.
Tip it a bit, tip it a bit.
There, that's good. That's good. Okay, yeah, we see it. That's the LaFontaine bubble.
Yeah, sparkle done, and that's in size 22.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share? Okay, Mike, let me get you spotlighted. And you want to unmute yourself so that
Yeah,
so we can hear you. Okay, Mike, there you go.
I found a little kit about making antibodies, and it was empty. And all it had in it was a piece of foam that had these holes cut in it already. And so I said, "Oh, those are familiar to me. I used to work in a geochemistry lab, and we had these devices that allowed you to punch holes in corks and rubber stoppers. And so it turns out that the number 2 is just the right size to punch a hole in here. Those are about 3/16 of an inch.
To make a good looking ant body.
Makes a little ant body.
You know the glasses these are reading glasses that you put over your sunglasses, right? When
Correct.
you're fishing.
Yep.
And I found on Amazon, and you could buy one pair for $12.59, or you can buy 6 pair for $17 on Amazon. So I bought 6 pair, and I'll be able to hand them up to all my friends.
Well, everyone, we've had a great time this evening with all of you on Fly Tying Friday with the Beaties. Please join us again next Friday. But for now, it's a wrap. We'll see you next Friday.